Shalom, even all praises, honor, and glory to our power Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shah, Bahashem Rachak, Quadash, double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessings to the hopeful elect of the tabernacles of David scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Wherever you may be, wherever you may be, Shalom, Yashra, Shalom. All right, so we're back in the book of Genesis, chapter 49. Okay, we're going through this because this is a chapter that what's said here in these chapters are not exactly of the 12 sons, but these things were said to the 12 sons of Jacob, and those things were referring to the descendants that will come from those 12 sons. So in other words, these 12 sons didn't experience these things that are being said here in this chapter. It was the descendants that come up from these 12 sons, which are you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, as well as your speckled birds scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, who may look like the other nations, but your bloodline is that of an Israelite. Okay, and so yeah, in this having an understanding, or I should say a deeper understanding of this chapter is important, especially when you're dealing with the 12 tribes sign. Like it says in Ezekiel, there would be two sticks in the hand coming together as one. Well, the two sticks are referencing the northern kingdom of Israel, headed by Ephraim, the so-called Puerto Ricans, and the southern kingdom of Judah, headed by Judah, which are the so-called Negroes. Okay, so it's meaning the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom coming back together as one, all the 12 tribes, and being one stick in the hand. And that is exactly what you see when the men have the signs. Like if you I mean, I guess if you go to camp, then it's different. But I'm saying, like, maybe you're a random person who's just listening and you've seen the Israelites. All right. And so you walk by, all right, and then you see the sign, and you'll notice it'll have Northern Kingdom, and then they'll have a split with Southern Kingdom. All right. And so those are the two sticks. All right. The Northern Kingdom being one stick, the Southern Kingdom being the other stick. All right. And you see that on the sign where you actually see them separated. But yeah, so going into this chapter, and it says Israel's prophecy concerning his sons. And Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken to Israel your father. Okay, so once again, it's referring to us, what we would experience, all right, later on, and not exactly the 12 sons. When you go into the word days, which is Yawam in the Hebrew, all right, day, time, year, all right, as the vision of time, all right, time period in general, all right, so on and so forth. But the key thing here is the word last. When you go into the word last, it is acharyav, all right, acharyav, and it means latter time, prophetic for future time. Oh, excuse me. So yeah, and these are telltale signs of who the people are, all right. And when you put that together with another chapter we talked about before, Deuteronomy chapter 28, Leviticus 26. Those pretty much are the same chapters, but those are the same things, like identifying who the Israelites are. It's just being told from a different angle versus when you're dealing with Genesis the 49th chapter and Deuteronomy 33rd chapter. They're saying the same thing, who the people of the Lord are going to be, identifying factors of who they are, and just telling it from a different angle, right? So having a better understanding of this chapter is important, basically breaking down the sign. It's one thing to actually have the sign, and you can spark up a conversation, and someone believe that they're from whatever tribe. They're, oh yeah, my dad is this, or I'm that, and but then it's a whole other thing to be able to break these things down to them. All right, so we're going into these things. All right, so so it says last days, prophetic for future time. Okay, and we're gonna jump down to we're now down here, verse 13. So Zebulun, okay? We get the word Zebulun, all right, which in the Hebrew, you see it, Zabalawan, Zabalawan. All right, sometimes you hear, brothers, if I can find it down here. Yeah, Zabalawan, all right? Zabalawan is mostly you hear brothers say Zabalawan, but also you saw up there, Zabawal one, which I just can't get right. Zabawal one, all right, or Zabalawan, all right. Zabawal one, Zabalawan, all right? But yeah, which means, as you just saw, exalted, okay? Um, and it says the 10th of the sons of Jacob, sixth and last of Leah. All right, so Leah has six of Jacob's sons, and which is that's half of the tribes right there. Okay. Um, it says sixth and last of Leah, progenitor of Zebulun. All right. And let me see. I don't think we need the word Zabal. Okay, so yeah, it goes to exalt, honor, uh, dwell exaltedly. All right, but there you go, because the name means exalted. Okay, and these the Zabalawan, Zebulun, all right, the tribe of Zebulun, all right, are these so-called, coming to the west part of the world, all right, after leaving the Assyrian captivity, being known as the so-called Mayans, all right. These are the Guatemalans and the Panamanians, okay, but they were known as the so-called Mayans when they first came over here to the west, um, which is similar to the word Mayum, which means waters, all right. As a matter of fact, because I get that real quick and point something out. Genesis 1:9, it says, and the Elohim said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. Right? So when you get the word waters here, in Genesis, you get Mayum, okay, which means water or waters, all right, so on and so forth. And that's similar to the word, we'll pull it up, right, to this word here, Song of Solomon 4:12. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. And when you get the word spring, all right, the word is gall. It says heap, spring, way below. All right, so it just says spring down below, right? But when you get the word fountain, H.4599, and you get the word Mayan, all right, it will be Maiyan if you spell it out. But look at what it has right here, Mayan, all right? So it goes back to the Hebrew word Mayan, all right, which means what? Spring, all right? Now, why is that important? Okay, because now we just saw the word Mayan there in the Hebrew, in the scripture, okay? So if we go back to, back up one more time, okay, Genesis 49:13, it says, Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be for an haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. All right, so now, because it says they shall dwell at the haven of the sea. Now, before we go, let's get the word haven. All right, and the word there is chawap, right? Chawap, and it says seashore, coast, shore. All right, so Mayim means spring, and the word that we got from Genesis, which was Mayum, not the same as that. It's just similar, but going into the word Mayin exactly comes up, right, which means, you know, spring. All right, or goes back to the word spring as well. Okay, so yes, coast, sea line. I mean, not coast. I'm a sea line. I mean, a coast, seashore. All right, or shore. Okay, so when it says they shall dwell at the haven of the sea, all right, the word hawak means seashore or a coast, right, or shore. So it says his border shall be unto Zidon, and this is important to understand and point out too. All right, Zidon mean Tazayadwan in the Hebrew, Tazayadwan, okay, and Zidon or Sidon mean hunting, and it says an ancient Phoenician city on Mediterranean coast north of Tyre. So what this is referring to is those Hamitic people, all right, the Phoenicians, okay, because because speaking on Tyre, all right, keep that in mind. Let's see what's back here real quick. Okay, so we don't need that. So it says a Phoenician city on the Mediterranean coast north of Tyre. Now, if you're familiar with the maps, you know where the Mediterranean Sea is. And you have, as a matter of fact, let's just pull it up over there, like modern day, Lebanon's, that general area. Okay, so Let's pull up some images here. Okay, perfect. Wait, we froze up. Bear with it. Okay, here we go. So you see Tyree, all right? You might hear, you probably heard before in the scripture where it says Tyree and Sidon or Zidon, right? And Sidon is not too far from Tyree. They're both in that southern portion of Lebanon, and this body, oh, here it is right here. This body of water right next to you, which I was about to say is the Mediterranean Sea, okay? I've heard often the island of Cyprus being mentioned. It's all over there in the Mediterranean Sea, okay? So, yeah, so there you go. And the thing is that's important with that is because let me see. Let me see if I can interject here. Maybe, I don't know, maybe map, I guess. We'll maybe get it. Not nap, though. Not an ancient nap. We need an ancient map. We may be able to pull what we're looking for. Very something important to point out. We're not super important, but it's good to point out. Okay, perfect. So when you look at the map here, you see Zebulon there. Now it said that they will be they shall dwell at the haven of the sea. Notice that Zebulon is not next to the sea. Now it's in that general area where we just showed you of Lebanon, right? So it's in that general area. But notice that it's not actually on the sea, okay? Or next to the sea. I believe they call it landlocked when you're surrounded by all land, no water, okay? So this goes to show you that what's being said here, just another little small indicator showing you what's being said here, not just about Zebulon, but all the sons, but in particular because we're dealing with Zebulon. What's been said here goes to show you it's talking not about the men Zebulon that birthed that particular tribe, but to the descendants that come from Zebulon. All right, those Guatemalans and Panamanians, so-called Mayans, all right, in the ancient days, so-called Mayan. Guatemalans and Panamanians, which neither of those names are correct names. You go back to Zebulon. So there you go. So perfect. So you see the map there. So when it says they shall dwell by the sea, well, they're not next to the sea. So it goes to show you it's talking about for a future event. Just like the word said, right? Last days, right? Or in particular, the word last, meaning a haryat, prophetic for future time. Okay. So yeah. So going back to speak about yep. So ancient Phoenician city on Mediterranean coast north of Tyre, right? And so because we mentioned Tyre, all right, because the Zidonians pretty much came over here to the America working for King Solomon, all right? And we can go into that history real quick because that's important as we, as part of this particular lesson here. So it says alliance with King Hiram, all right? I'm not sure if you've heard of Hiram before, but he was, this is pretty much what Hamite, but he worked for King Solomon. Did I say David a while ago? I don't know if I said David or not. If I did, I meant to say King Solomon. But yeah, so let's read this. So 1 Kings 5:1. And Hiram, king of Tyre, all right, like we just read, right? Tyre, okay, over there from the other definition under Zebulun, all right, Tazar, Tyrus will rock the Phoenician city on the coast of the Mediterranean, on the Mediterranean coast, which is the area of modern day Lebanon, right? So it says, in Hiram, king in ancient time, those were the lands of the Canaanites, all right, which was promised to us first by our forefather Abraham, all right. But that's a side note. And Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants unto Solomon, for he had heard that they had anointed him king in the room of his father. For Hiram was ever a lover of David, all right. Doesn't mean sexually, all right, charged or whatever. It just mean favoring him, all right. So don't get that twisted. It says, and Solomon, like some try to do when they talk about David and Absalom, right? No, that's not what it's talking about. It says, and Solomon sent to Hiram, saying, thou knowest how that David my father could not build an house unto the name of the Lord Yahweh his power, for the wars which were about him on every side, right? Because David did a lot of fighting, a lot of killing, all right, until Yahweh put them under the soles of his feet, okay? Which is beautiful because when you go into have the understanding that King Solomon was a previous life of the Lord Yahushua, and then it talks about right there where it says putting his enemies on his feet. That's the same thing it says about a Yahushua. The Lord's going to put his enemies on his feet because Yahushua is the one to come and reign on David's throne as his son, all right, King Solomon, but also as reincarnated as Yahushua. Okay,
that makes sense to you. Just, kind of side note there. But verse 4 says, "But now Yahweh my power hath given me rest on every side, so that there is neither adversary nor evil occurrent." Okay? Let me get the word occurrent. All right. Occurrence, happening, chance. So in other words, nothing going down right now. Okay? Um, Verse 5 says, "And behold, I purpose to build an house unto the name of Yahweh my power, as Yahweh spake unto David my father, saying, Thy son, whom I will set upon thy throne in thy room, he shall build an house unto my name. Now therefore command thou that thy hew me cedar trees out of Lebanon." Now, Lebanon is known for having a lush forest and trees that will come, all right? And obviously, we're going into the talk in this particular chapter, talking about Solomon, making preparations to build up this house for the Lord that his father David couldn't build up because he was pretty much a bloody man because of war. Okay, so it says, "And unto thee will I give," because now remember he said, let me read it again. "Now therefore command thou that they hew me cedar trees out of Lebanon, and my servants shall be with thy servants. And unto thee will I give hire for thy servants according to all that thou shalt appoint. For thou knowest that there is not among us any that can skill to hew timber like unto the Sidonians." So this is Solomon making employment of Hiram's men. Okay. So it says, "And it came to pass, when Hiram heard the words of Solomon, that he rejoiced greatly." And that's how it's going to be in the kingdom, man. Okay, when we're in power, these other nations they're gonna work into it. They're gonna have to get used to it. But once it's set in that, man, this is a way better life than when we were in league with Esau. Okay, and they're gonna actually start to rejoice over serving us, because that's what they were made for anyways, to serve like Yahweh Shah. It's his kingdom, and he says that he's gonna share it with us. That's why I point out sometimes when you go into Psalms 2, it talks about Yahweh Shah inheriting the nations, but then it says that he's going to share it with us, joint heirs and stuff like that. So when you go to Revelation 2, it actually talks about us getting that same thing that was said about him in Psalms 2. All right. If you go back and read it, you see exactly what I'm talking about. Like, yeah, because in Psalms, it's talking about Yahushua. But then when you get to Revelation, it says that he that overcometh, if I'm correct, something like that. All right. You're going to inherit the nations. But that goes back to him, his kingdom, but him sharing it with us. So all the blessings of the kingdom of heaven honestly come through Yahushua receiving his kingdom and then sharing the kingdom with us. That's how we get the blessings that are promised to us. Right? Because everything in the kingdom is about him. Colossians 1, we point out all the time. Everything was made for him and by him, and of him all things consist. He's before all things. Right? But let's keep going. So it says, "And said, Blessed be Yahweh this day, which hath given unto David a wise son over this great people. And Hiram sent to Solomon, saying, I have considered the things which thou sentest to me that thou sentest to me for, and I will do all thy desire concerning timber of cedar and concerning timber of fir. My servant shall bring them down from Lebanon unto the sea, and I will convey them by sea in floats unto the place that thou shalt appoint me, and will cause them to be discharged there. And thou shalt receive them, and thou shalt accomplish my desire in giving food for my household." So Hiram gave Solomon cedar trees and fir trees according to all his desire. And Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 measures of wheat for food to his household, and 20 measures of pure oil. Thus gave Solomon by Hiram year by year. And Yahweh gave Solomon wisdom, and he promised him, and there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and they two made a league together. All right. And you keep reading on, it says in conscription of laborers, and King Solomon raised a levy out of all Israel, and the levy was 30,000 men. Now, this levy is actually talking about mid troops, because levy can also be a tax that's raised. But in this particular case, levy is talking about raising men, which it says it, excuse me, right there. As a matter of fact, let's just pull up levy real quick. All right, the word is mas. Okay, see, gang or body of forced laborers, task workers, labor band or gang, forced service, task work, serfdom, which is pretty much slave, tributary, tribute, levy, taskmasters, someone over slave work, right? Discomfited, all right, labor band, labor gang, slave gang, gang overseers, forced service, serfdom, tribute, and forced payment, all right? So yeah, so in this case, it's actually talking about raising up men. This is the same word right there, which we didn't have to pull it up. As a matter of fact, let me pull that back up. That's the wrong word, not king. Because I saw this. Masas. Okay, so we don't need that. So there. So yeah, it says, and King Solomon raised a levy out of all Israel, and the levy was 30,000 men. So he raised up 30,000 men, got together 30,000 men, right? So it says, and he sent them to Lebanon 10,000 a month by courses. A month, they were in Lebanon, and 2 months at home. All right, so they were pretty much, these 30,000 men had a particular business, which is what he was talking about with those, employment of Hiram's men and the trees and so on and so forth. All right, they were gathered up for this purpose. All right, so it says a month they were in Lebanon and 2 months at home, and Adoniram was over the levy. And Solomon had 70,000 that bear burdens, and 80,000 hewers in the mountains. Beside the chief of Solomon's officers, which were over the work, 3,300 which ruled over the people that wrought in the work. And the king commanded, and they brought great stones, costly stones, and hewed stones to lay the foundation of the house. And Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders did hew them, and the stones quarrers. So they prepared timber and stones to build a house. So here, reading through this whole chapter, all right, you get the understanding that Solomon was preparing the building of the Lord's house. That is David, this father David had the pattern to, all right. But also you go into the employment of Hiram, who was a Hamite, all right. And we just went to the word Phoenicians or Tyre, Sidon, Lebanon, talked about all those things, putting it all together, right? So with that being read, understanding the employment that I clicked something. Oh, yeah, I did my mistake. So the employment of Hiram's men, all right, these so-called Phoenicians, right, of Tyre, all right, these Hamites, King Hiram. As a matter of fact, before I go, let's go into Hiram real quick. His name, all right, Hayaram, meaning noble. The king of Tyre, who sent workmen and materials to Jerusalem to build both the palace for David and the temple for Solomon. All right, the chief architect and engineer of Solomon's temple sent by King Hiram to Solomon. All right, so there you go. So as we move forward, and we go over here to actually First Kings chapter 10, and past it. All right, 22 says, for the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish, or Tarshish, you might see it, Tarshish or Tarshish, but this is talking about the area of Spain, okay? Because modern, is that, no, I'm thinking about something else. All right, so, but yeah, Tarshish, as a matter of fact, we can see what it says real quick. All right, Tarashash, or Tarashash, yeah, Tarashash, all right? So, yellow jasper. Here we go. A city of the Phoenicians in a distant part of the Mediterranean Sea, to which the prophet Jonah was trying to. I just talked about Jonah the other day. to prophet Jonah was trying to flee. All right. But you see where Jonah came from, where he went to jump on a ship to go to elsewhere. Right. He went over here to. He was trying to go over there. So it says, and that's pretty much all we read right there. So it says, with the navy of Hiram. All right, because remember we just read that Hiram was employed by Solomon. All right, and this is just going into another aspect of that same point. All right, him being employed by Solomon. So here's what happened. It says, with the navy of Hiram. All right, for the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish. All right, from leaving from Spain. All right, with the Strait of Gibraltar, which actually was named after an Israelite who was going under the term of a Moor. Well, those are Israelites. All right, or a lot of them, not exactly every one of them are Israelites. Pretty much Israelites that were practicing the Islamic religion, but just in general, all right. That guy, I forget his name though, but yeah, the Strait of Gibraltar was actually named after an Israelite and still named that today. Okay, who was supposed to be under the term of being a Moor. But anyways, so leaving from now, I'm not saying they exactly left on the Strait of Gibraltar, it's just mentioned because as a matter of fact, let's see if we can pull up Tarshish right here. Okay, thank you for the tires. Okay. Let's see if we can get something else in. Maybe Tarshish will come up different. I'm not sure. Okay. Yep. See, there it is right there. The Strait of Gibraltar, that little sliver of water right there between the land. All right. And look, you see right there, Tarshish right there. So that's why I said not exactly from the Strait of Gibraltar, but just that area. But there you go. You see Tarshish right there. So, and this right here, if you blow out the map, okay, so here's a good one. Right there. See, Spain, right? And you can see it says Tartessus, all right? That red dot there, near all the blue dots, because I see there's some red squares, all right? But the blue circles down there, you see the red dot, all right? So there you go, the general area where they were leaving from. So we go back and read into it now. It says, "For the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory and apes and peacocks." Now this is important because as we keep reading into, all right, the history of the Northern Kingdom Israelites, right? Because after the Syrian captivity, around what was it, like around 722, okay, give or take, because I believe because they went down, the Assyrians went down to the Babylonians, around the latter end of the 700s, actually not the 700s, excuse me, like I guess like 605, 604, somewhere around there, which is where you get the figure of Nabopolassar. That was the father, or the father of Nebuchadnezzar II, who you read about in the Bible, because his father Nebuchadnezzar I lived long years ago. All right, so Nabopolassar is one that was actually under those Assyrians, led a rebellion, all right, and pretty much, along with the who was it, the Babylonians, all right, and then pretty much that's how he got his. Actually, no, it was, who was it? I forget exactly who it was, but anyways, him standing up and rebelling along with the other enemy nation that was going against the Assyrians and breaking them down is where the Babylonian Empire pretty much, formed, and it went down pretty much to his son Nebuchadnezzar II, right? So yeah, so that history there is somewhat important, all right, because when you're dealing with the Northern Kingdom after the Assyrians fell, they pretty much were able to leave, all right. And so right here it says, "Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory and apes and peacocks. So the king Solomon exceeded all the kings of the earth for riches and for wisdom." All right, because it would take them a year and a half to get over here to the west. They never lived here, but they just came over here to do their business. And of course, Solomon's men will accompany them because these are still heathens. Yeah, he made a little truce deal with them and gave them employment and business like that, whatever. But these are still heathens. All right, so Solomon set up probably those 30,000 men, right? Because those were the ones that he's raised up, that levy, right? So he had men that were going along with the men of Hiram, all right, to the west here in the Americas. Before anyone ever lived here, they traveled here, but they never actually lived here and stayed here, all right? And that's where you actually get the Olmec heads. Those Olmec heads are not us, okay? Those Olmec heads are, the Olmec heads are these Hamites, okay? I don't know if I can punch up the word Olmec and see if I can Google over here. No, I can't. Okay, so whatever. But it's not important because you see them big ugly faces. But the Olmec heads are not Israelites, man. The Olmec heads were Hamites, man. Those men of Tyre, all right, or the Phoenician city over there, leaving out Hiram's men, basically. All right, they brought those Olmec heads over there, okay, as a staple, but it ain't doing anything special. So those are not Israelite heads, right? Those Olmec heads are of Hiram's men, okay. Now, all that working together in there, because when you go now, we move forward. So, and Lord, will you be edified? All this is making sense to you, because we're not just talking about things; we're leading up to something. All right. So yeah. So it took them a year and a half to go here to the west, and then a year and a half to come back. That's why we just read that in Kings. All right. So that was a 3-year trip to bring all those things that they were bringing Solomon. All right, for in his service. Now the Northern Kingdom Israelites, when they left, it mentions a year and a half. Why? Because they never came back. When they went, it was the same year and a half, but they never came back. Okay? So that's why that last scripture we just read there was important. So this is 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 1. "In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea the son of Elah to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of Yahweh, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him. Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his servant and gave him presents. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore, the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. All right. So you're talking about the downfall of the northern kingdom of Israel, right? Which there's more history you can read about in other chapters. A big portion of that is in Isaiah, okay, where it mentions a lot of the history there around chapters like 30, 31, moving forward to several chapters forward from there. All right. But yeah, they were taken down to the Syrian captivity. All right. So I almost want to. So let's keep reading. It says, in the ninth year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river of Gozan, and then cities of the Medes. And I pointed this out one time. I wasn't going to do it in this lesson. Let's see here, because I went into a whole Earth map or whatever. All right, if we can find it, I'm not sure if it'll come up, and showed you exactly where possibly they came from. All right, because the area where they were empties out. Daggone Harbor Freights. I don't need no tools. Let me see. Maybe we'll get to it by there. Cause it'll make okay, perfect. Now we can't exactly see the rivers because I was doing a whole Google, not Google Map, what I can't remember what it was, like a satellite thing to really break it down and show you, right? But we'll just use this, okay? So you see here the Euphrates and the Tigris. Now they don't show it here, but there's other. Doggone it. I'm trying to. Okay, so let's just use this one. So they don't show it here, but there's other rivers. Well, actually, they show a few of them, but there's other rivers that break off. So now you see Nineveh, Assyria. So when you look at Habor and what was it, Gozan? What's his name? Whatever it was. This is in a general area. So this is what modern day Iraq is. So they jumped into those rivers and eventually got into the Euphrates River, and that's how they came all the way down here to this body of water. And from that body of water, all right, they moved all the way down past so-called Africa and Madagascar and all the way around there, and then they ended up in South America, Central America, and North America. All right, that's how the northern tribes got over here. Okay, that's a very important history to understand, which I know we're only going into it now, dealing with Zebulon, but overall with the northern kingdoms, that's a very important history for you to understand. Okay. So we go back. So Lord will, you can, kind of generalize and see. All right. So they came into from rivers here in the modern day Iraq area, jumped into rivers. Those rivers led into Euphrates. Euphrates led down here to is that the Persian Gulf? Then Persian Gulf, or is that or Atlantic? No, I can't remember. All right. But anyways, you get what I'm saying here. And then there they went into, all right, the big open ocean down here. All right. So, and then they came around the bottom of Africa, so called, right, and all the way here to the west. So it says by the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. So yeah, so okay, they were placed in Halah and Habor by the river of Gozan, okay, and in the cities of the Medes. So we just saw what that was, okay. So they were moved out of Samaria and placed in those cities because they were taken into captivity, and then heathens were moved into Samaria, and that's an important history also to understand when you're moving into the accounts of Yahushua, because you had the woman at the well. She was a Samaritan woman, but she wasn't an Israelite. She was a heathen. Okay, so and there's some that break that down wrong. All right, but that's a whole other topic. So let's continue on talking about the Israelites and how it ties in everything we read before with Hiram and everything else, right? Um, hmm. we can skip over why Israel fell and so on and so forth, um, because it's important, but it's just not important for what we're trying to point out here. So I just want to try to get to without reading the whole entire chapter. And that's what we just mentioned. The cities of Israel was filled with strangers. The king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cutha and from Ava and from Hamath and from Sepharvaim and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel, because we just read where they were moved from, and they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. All right, and so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there. They feared not Yahweh. All right, which that's just going into what was happening to those heathens living in the land. Yeah, because we don't necessarily have to read the whole chapter to make this point. All right. So instead, what we'll do is because what we read up here, all right, because leads over here to the Apocrypha. All right. And let's go get this real quick. See if we can jump into that real quick. Second Esdras, chapter 13, one of my favorite chapters. Get down here to verse 39, 40, maybe. Yeah, 39. And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him, these are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea, which is Hosea we just read about, the king in 2 Kings chapter 17. We just read about that. All right. And they were moved into the cities of Habor and I forget the name of the other one, but by the river of Gozan. Okay. That's why we were pointing out the rivers and Euphrates and the body of water and how they traveled over here, right? So it says, whom Shalmaneser, which is Shalmaneser we just read about, I believe it's Shalmaneser the fifth, if I'm correct, but anyways, Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. So when he says he carried them over the waters, it's talking about over all those different rivers there, okay? Past the Euphrates and the other rivers and into the land of Habor and Halah and Habor, okay? Near the river Gozan, all right? So that should make more sense to you. So let's keep going. So it says, but they took this counsel among themselves that they will leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. Remember, remember we talked about the Assyrians being broken up, and then the Babylonians coming up and being the next, pretty much, empire. All right, the next big empire in the earth. Okay, so around this time, general give or take. All right, you can see how the Israelites were able to get free, and they decided that we're going to go where nobody is, and we can worship the Lord, in peace properly, which ultimately they never did. They worshiped the Lord in a sense, but it wasn't properly. They were going off on a lot of things, and it got real crazy. They were sacrificing, people and stuff like that, children, kind of, like all the tribes. All the tribes went off, man. So no one actually worshiped the Lord properly, okay? Especially when you deal with the Northern Kingdom. They went totally off, okay? And we just, because we went into the one of the other earlier sessions about Simeon and Levi, man, doing the witchcraft and voodoo and stuff like that, okay? So when you're dealing with the tribes that came over here, that's exactly what happened. They thought they were doing right. They thought they were serving the Lord, all right, possibly, but they weren't doing things the right way. But anyways, that's just part of Israel's walk, all right, all the tribes, all right, not just Zebulun or whoever, all the tribes. And because that's part of the curses in Deuteronomy 28, that you serve other gods which your fathers have known, right, in a foreign land that you don't know. So it says that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land, right? Because remember, in the Northern Kingdom, they all went off, all right? And then they got taken into captivity, and then they were able to come over here. So they thought in their minds to do right, but they never actually did right, see? So it says, and they enter into Euphrates, as we just pointed out, by the narrow places of the river, all right? So the one river goes on, there's other rivers around, but that one river in particular goes on, all right? And then so on and so forth, moving forward down to Euphrates, and you get it, right? So it says, for the Most High then shewed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over. Because when you go out at the bottom of the Euphrates and pass all those bodies of water down there, those are some of the worst waters on the planet, man. All right. So the Lord had to stay and calm those waves, because they would have perished in those waters down there. All right. South of, or I guess, south of and pretty much east of, like Saudi Arabia, Oman, and those areas, right? Those are the worst waters on the planet, man. So the Lord stays those waters because, prophecy being fulfilled, so that they can pass by those waters, come all the way south past Madagascar, and all the way around the bottom of Africa and over here to South America, all right? And central and northern, spreading out. It says, for through that country, so it wasn't, when it says through that country, it's talking about the waters, not actually talking about through the landmass. For through that country, there was a great way to go. Namely, here it is right here, what we read in 1 Kings 10, of a year and a half. Remember, Hiram's men guided, or not guided, but Hiram's men assisted by Solomon's men, because they weren't just going to go over there by themselves. A year and a half there, a year and a half back. So, but these tribes never, the Northern Kingdom never came back. So that's why it only mentions a year and a half, because they only went, they never came back. It was a one-way ticket to fulfill prophecy. All right. It says, and the same region is called Arsareth. Okay. And this is, oh, and then I didn't get that. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Because if you type in another land, it breaks down the word Arsareth, all right? Because in the Hebrew, it is Achar Aratazah, all right? Here we go. We can use this right here. Land, H776, is Aratazah, all right? Land, earth, okay? It even says country or territory. Then it says another. The word there is achar, meaning just that, other, another, or other. All right, so achar, another, aratazah, land. All right, country, territory. Achar aratazah. So that is where you go back right there, and you get the word Arsareth. It probably even come up if you Google it, because they changed so much on the internet. Right, Esau. The name of the land beyond the great river, far away from the habitation of man, in which the 10 tribes of Israel will dwell, observing the law of Moses until the time of the restoration, according to the fourth Esdras, blah, blah, blah. I didn't really exactly tell. It just goes into a little bit of it, but we just broke that down. So Arsareth, Achar, Aratazah, meaning another land. So there you go. And it says it, let me find my verse. I lost it. Yep. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely a year and a half, and in the same region is called Arsareth. Okay? Because it says they would go for into a further country. Now remember, one of the words that came up for uh uh uh, uh land was country. Okay, so it says, then dwelt they there until the latter time, because once again, when they came over here, they never went back. Now, of course, through personal travels, they all nations on the planet start to spread out more. But the thing is, all the tribes over here, especially in America, right? All the 12 tribes can be found here in America. And even if it's just a little few here, they're all here, okay? They're all over the earth, but they're also all here. The children of Israel and the children of Judah were pressed together. I believe that was Jeremiah 15:33, okay? So it says they dwelt they there until the latter time, going back to what we talked about, how they only came with the one-way ticket here. It says, and now when they shall begin to come down, this is talk about the southern kingdom, because eventually, the southern kingdom, they fled from the Romans, all right, 70 AD, and we scattered abroad, but most of us ran into Africa. Then they picked us up from Africa. So this is the lie that's been told, that you're African and you're not African. The Africans are not our people. Okay, we were picked up into the slave trade from Africa. All right, but you came originally fleeing from the Romans. All right, out of Jerusalem, fleeing from the Romans in 70 AD. All right, from the time period from 66, 70 to 73, around that general time period there, that window. Okay. So it says they dwelt then there until the latter times, talking about northern kingdom. And then it says, and now when they shall begin to come, it's talking about the southern kingdom, when they were brought over here in the slave trades, over here to the Americas as well, to build and plant and, all these crops and, reap the fields and all these different things, all right, in slavery, to also fulfill prophecy. So it says, the highest shall stay the springs of the stream again, because prophecy had to be fulfilled. So Esau was able to bring us over the waters on those slave ships, all right, because the Lord made sure that the ships got over here by staying the waters again, for the southern kingdom, all right, to fulfill prophecy, that they may go through. Therefore sawest thou the multitude with peace, but those that be left behind of thy people are they that are found within my borders, because that's what it says in Isaiah 11. All right, where he's going to gather, them from this place, that place, and even the islands of the sea, because we're also scattered abroad in all that's what James 1 and 1 is so important for. James 1 and 1, to the 12 tribes scattered abroad greeting. Scattered abroad, you get the word diaspora, which is the Israelites who dwelling amongst the heathen nations. And that's all over the planet. All right, that's why we always speak about it when we open up, all right, camp. All right, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, because you are the 12 tribes of Israel, but also the speckled birds, because you may look like a Chinese person, or or Japanese person, or Ishmaelite, or whoever, East Indian, but your bloodline actually goes back to that of an Israelite and not of one of those heathens, man. Okay, the Spirit bear witness with our spirit that we are the sons of living power. Okay, so we have Israelites all over the earth. So it says, and even still in the what's today the modern day state of Israel, but in the Lord's borders, right, in those lands. Now, when he destroyed the multitude of the nations that are gathered together, he shall defend his people that remain. That's the remnant, the hopeful elect, the 1/3 hopeful elect of northern and southern kingdom Israelites coming back together as one. That's why we keep mentioning that Ezekiel chapter 37, right? So we've gone through all of that. Okay. So now you understand how all that works into what we were speaking about. Lord willing, that it was understandable. Okay. Because we talked about Tarshish, Spain. Oh yeah, but coming over here to the east, particular island in the area, all right, you have the Panama Canal, all right. And now I'm mentioning in ancient times, Hiram's men were those Olmec heads, all right, in Mesoamerica, right? Those Olmec heads were of Hiram's men, Hamites, basically, okay, or so-called Africans, if you want to call them that, but Hamites, right? So going back to the Panama Canal, all right, is pretty much between the Caribbean Sea, all right, and the Pacific Ocean, and it pretty much it connects South America and Mesoamerica or Central America, right? And pretty much by an isthmus, all right, which going to because it pretty much it kept the ships, all right, from having to go the need to sail all the way south around South America and then back up. All right. So what happened with the Panama Canal is to cut out all that extra traveling. Okay. Which that made it so much more convenient, in particular for Esau. Okay. And then you have more history, obviously, with as all the tribes do with Esau, man. Okay. But yeah, that and then you go let's see here. Actually, I could have used that. Well, I guess we use the Google extra Google. Yeah, Panama Canal. So it's not that pretty of a picture there. Look, now remember, because we didn't finish the scripture. Now look at what we're looking at. What do you see? A big ship, Panama Canal, so on and so forth. All right. So and that's blurry. There you go. See Caribbean Sea right there. All right. Pacific Ocean. Then you have the two land masses being connected. Right. So if we go back over here, let's get back to our starting point. Genesis 49. Because there's only one scripture. And 13, it says, Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea. Now you see how that makes more sense. All right? Because sea, meaning what? Oh, actually not sea, we didn't want sea. We wanted haven. We probably could have got the word sea. Hawap, seashore, coast, shore. And pretty much, you can see how all this water, all right, is connected between those two lands by way of the Panama Canal. And that's why it says what? He shall be an haven of ships. You see? Makes sense? So it says, and his border shall be unto Zidon. All right. And as we said before, when you go into look at the ancient map, all right, Zebulun was landlocked. So what is it talking about? It's talking about the latter days, just like the word means, right? Prophetic for future time. Okay. So pretty much you can see how that all fits together there. All right. The Panama Canal, haven for ships, they built that. All right. Which, you know, if I'm correct, I think Esau built that. Not exactly Zebulonites, but Esau built that. But yeah, I mean, you can see how it all makes sense, man. And so who lives there? All right, in these areas, or at least spread out from those areas. All right, you get the Panamanians and the Guatemalans, all right? We was at one point called the so-called Mayans, and we pulled that out from the scriptures, man. Mayan, all right, meaning fountain or spring, or coming from the word fountain, meaning spring, okay? And a haven for ships. You see all the water, Panama Canal, all right? So it should make sense for you, all right? So that's it right there, all right? That's pretty much it for Zebulun, Genesis 49 to 13. So Lord will you edify to that son, I'm going to say, Shalom.